The afternoon sun was soft and golden, the kind that made everything look peaceful. Maya Thorne leaned against the side of her small, silver sedan, letting out a long breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. The moving truck was gone. The last box was inside. Oakwood Estates was quiet, just like the rental listing had promised. Her body still hummed with the leftover tension, a ghost from her old life. For the past 2 years, her world had been a windowless room, lit by the cool glow of computer monitors, tracing digital footprints of people who wanted to stay hidden. It was important work. It was also work that ate away at you, piece by piece. When the case finally closed, her section chief took one look at her and didn't ask, he told. "You're taking leave. Real leave. Go somewhere that doesn't have a server rack." So she found Oakwood. It was all trimmed lawns and big, old trees. It was supposed to be boring. For Maya, boring sounded like a dream. She needed groceries. The fridge was empty, except for a single bottle of water. She got back in her car, the familiar feel of the steering wheel, a small comfort. The grocery store was only a 10-minute drive, a big, bright place at the edge of a small shopping plaza. It was just past 5, and the lot was busy with people stopping on their way home from work. Maya found a spot not too far from the entrance. She was halfway out of the car, 1 foot on the asphalt, when she saw the police cruiser. It was white with green stripes, idling 2 rows over. She didn't think much of it. A cop getting a coffee, maybe. She pushed her cart through the automatic doors, the blast of cool air washing over her. Inside, she moved through the aisles with a calm focus. Apples, pasta, salad greens, chicken. Normal things. The simple act of choosing what to eat for dinner felt strangely powerful. This was her life now. Her choices. Her quiet bout about 20 minutes later, she pushed her full cart back out into the warm evening. She loaded the bags into her trunk, closed it, and was just about to get into the driver's seat when a voice stopped her. "Afternoon, ma'am." She turned. 2 police officers were standing there. The one who had spoken was older, with a thick build and a face that looked like it had settled into a permanent state of mild suspicion. His nameplate said Bauer. The other officer was younger, with a fresher face. He hung back a step, his eyes taking everything in. His tag said Murphy. "Good afternoon, officers," Maya said, her voice even. She kept her hands visible, resting on the roof of her car. Officer Bauer took a slow step closer. "This your car?" "Yes, it is." "You live around here?" he asked. His tone wasn't openly hostile, but it had an edge to it, a testing quality. It was a tone Maya knew. It was the sound of an assumption being made. "I do. Just moved in today, over on Cypress Lane." "Cypress," Bauer repeated, as if checking a mental list. "Don't think I've seen you before." "That would be because I just moved in today," Maya said, keeping her reply polite. She made sure to smile, just a little. It was a practice thing, non-threatening, cooperative. The younger officer, Murphy, shifted his weight. He was looking from his partner to Maya, and back again. "Can I see some identification?" Bauer asked. "Of course." Maya moved slowly, deliberately. She opened her car door, reached for her purse on the passenger seat, and pulled out her wallet. She handed her driver's license to Bauer. He took it, holding it up, looking from the photo to her face. The photo was from 3 years ago. She looked younger, less tired. "Maya Thorne," he read aloud. "From the city." He said the city, like it was another country. "What brings you to Oakwood Estates?" "Just wanted a quieter place to live," she said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Bauer handed the license back to Murphy, who gave it a cursory glance before passing it back to Maya. Bauer's eyes swept over her car, then back to her. "You have any proof of residence? A lease agreement, maybe?" Just so we know you're not lost. The tiny pause was deliberate. Maya heard it. A hot pinprick of anger sparked in her chest, but she didn't let it touch her face. She was too good at this. Her whole job was about not showing your cards. "I have a copy in the glove compartment," she said. She leaned into the car again, popped the glove box, and pulled out a folded packet of papers. She unfolded the top page, the lease, and handed it over. Bauer studied it. He took his time. Murphy watched the people walking in and out of the store, looking a little uncomfortable with the length of this stop. Finally, Bauer handed the paper back. "All right? Everything seems in order." He didn't sound happy about it. He sounded almost disappointed. "Welcome to Oakwood. We like to keep an eye on things here. Make sure everything's as it should be." "I appreciate that," Maya said, taking the lease back. Her voice was smooth, neutral. "Is there anything else, officers?" Bauer seemed to search for a reason to prolong it, but came up empty. "No, that'll be all. You have a good evening now. You too." Maya got into her car, closed the door, and started the engine. She didn't look at them as she backed out. She kept her eyes on her mirrors, her movements calm. She drove out of the parking lot onto the main road, and only when she was 3 blocks away did she let her shoulders drop from where they had crept up near her ears. She let out a slow, shaky breath. The familiar old feeling settled in her stomach. The feeling of being sized up, judged, and found suspicious just for existing in a space. She'd hoped, foolishly maybe, that a new place would mean a break from that. Just for a little while, she replayed it in her head. His tone, his questions. The request for proof of residence when she'd already provided a valid license. It was a fishing expedition. A small one, but a fishing trip nonetheless. As she turned onto her new street, Cypress Lane, she pushed the frustration down. She was here to decompress, to forget about looking over her shoulder. Maybe this was just a one-off. A bored officer on a slow day. Maybe the younger one, Murphy, was new, and they were just showing him the ropes, checking on a new face. She tried to give it the most generous explanation possible. She pulled into her driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires. The house looked peaceful in the twilight. Her house. Her quiet. She carried the groceries inside, putting everything away in the clean, empty cabinets. She made herself a simple dinner and ate it at the small table, looking out at the backyard. The anger from the parking lot had cooled, but it hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into a low, watchful hum in the back of her mind. She was an expert at reading patterns, at seeing the tiny clues that others missed. And a pattern, no matter how small it starts, always deserves attention. She finished her meal, washed her plate, and promised herself she wouldn't dwell on it. This was her fresh start. But later, as she lay in bed in the unfamiliar silence of the new house, listening to the distant sound of a train, the memory of Officer Bauer's scrutinizing gaze was the last thing she saw before she finally fell asleep. It was just a minor ripple, she told herself. Just a small thing. But in Maya's experience, small things had a way of growing if you didn't pay attention. And paying attention was what she did best. The quiet of Cypress Lane was both a comfort and a strange new sound. Maya spent the next few days unpacking, setting up her small home office with a single laptop strictly for personal use, and trying to settle into the rhythm of doing nothing. She went for long walks in the mornings, noticing the way the older neighbors waved from their porches. She started reading a novel, just for fun, something she hadn't done in years. But the encounter at the grocery store stuck with her. It was a small stone in her shoe, a constant, low-grade irritation. She found herself glancing out the front window more often than she needed to, especially in the evenings. It was on the third night that she noticed the pattern. She was in her living room, curled on the sofa when the sweep of headlights slowed outside. A white and green cruiser, moving at a crawl, passed her house. It wasn't unusual for a patrol car to come down the street. What was unusual was the time. 10:15 p.m. And then again the next night at 10:30. And the night after that, around the same time. It wasn't proof of anything. It was a coincidence, she told herself. A regular patrol route. But the part of her mind that was trained to connect dots, the part she was trying to quiet, started drawing lines. The car always slowed near her driveway. It never stopped, just rolled past, a silent, observant presence. On Friday, she decided to go for a late run. The air was cool, good for clearing her head. She pulled on dark leggings and a hoodie, tucked her keys and phone into a small armband, and set off at a steady pace. The neighborhood was dark and still, streetlights casting long pools of yellow on the pavement. The sound of her own breathing and the soft thud of her shoes were the only noises. She was about a mile from her house, turning onto a quieter side street with fewer lights, when she saw the familiar shape parked under a large oak tree. The cruiser. Her pulse jumped, not from the run, but from a sudden cold recognition. She kept her pace, her eyes fixed ahead. Don't acknowledge. Just keep moving. She heard the engine turn over. The headlights flicked on, bright in the dark street, illuminating her from behind. The car didn't pull up beside her. It just crept along, following her, matching her pace exactly. The spotlight on the side of the car suddenly blazed to life, pinning her in its harsh white circle. Maya stopped running. She turned, squinting against the light, one hand coming up to shield her eyes. Her heart was hammering now. The passenger door opened, and Officer Bauer stepped out. Officer Murphy got out from the driver's side, but he stayed near the car, his posture unsure. "Evening," Bauer said, his voice cutting through the quiet. He walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. "Out for a run pretty late, aren't you?" Maya lowered her hand, trying to see his face past the glare. "It's a nice night for it," she said, keeping her voice calm. She could feel the sweat cooling on her skin, making her shiver. "We've had some reports in this area," Bauer said, not specifying what kind of reports. "People seeing someone moving around backyards. Furtive movements, you know?" He used the word furtive like it was a specific charge. "You fit the description we got." Maya just looked at him. "Officer, I'm just running." "On the street." "In workout clothes." "I don't think I look very furtive." Bauer took another step closer. He was close enough now that she could see his expression. It wasn't angry. It was calculating, like he was trying to solve a puzzle she represented. "Can I see some ID?" "I'm out for a run," Maya repeated, a hard edge entering her tone. "I have my keys and my phone. My driver's license is back at my house. On Cypress Lane, which you already have the address for. We just need to verify," Bauer said, his voice flat. "For everyone's safety. Why don't you come take a seat in the car while we sort this out?" A cold spike of anger shot through Maya. Am I being detained? Am I under arrest? Bauer's eyes narrowed slightly. We're conducting an investigation. We can do it here on the street, or we can do it down at the station. Your choice. The threat was clear. From behind him, Officer Murphy shifted his weight again. He looked young and uncomfortable, his eyes darting between his partner and Maya. Fine, Maya said, the word tight. We can do it right here. She held out her arms slightly, as if to say, Go ahead. Bauer didn't touch her. Instead, he started firing questions. Where was she coming from? What was her exact route? Did she see anyone else? Who could verify her whereabouts earlier? The questions were rapid, designed to trip her up, to find a crack in her story. But Maya's story was the truth. She answered each one with clipped precision, her mind working faster than her mouth. She memorized everything: the time, 10:47 p.m., the exact location, the way Murphy wouldn't meet her eyes, the faint smell of coffee from Bauer's breath. The interview lasted 7 minutes. It felt like an hour under the blinding spotlight on the dark, empty street. Finally, Bauer seemed to run out of steam. He hadn't found a contradiction. "All right," he said, his tone suggesting she'd gotten away with something. "We'll be putting this in our report. I'd advise you to be careful running this late. This isn't the city. People notice things." "I'll keep that in mind," Maya said, her voice like ice. He gave her one last long look, then turned and walked back to the cruiser. Murphy hurriedly got back in the driver's seat. The spotlight clicked off, plunging her back into near darkness. The car pulled away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the road, her run completely ruined. She didn't move until the taillights had vanished. The anger that flooded her then was hot and pure. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't community policing. This was targeting. It was a message. Asterisk, we're watching you. You don't belong here. Asterisk, she walked the rest of the way home, her mind racing now, not with fear, but with a focused, analytical fury. The part of her that was on leave, that wanted to read novels and grow tomatoes, was shoved aside. The professional, the investigator, took full control. Back inside her house, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. She went to her personal laptop, but she didn't open her email or a social media site. She opened a blank document. At the top, she typed Bauer, R, and asterisk Murphy, B, asterisk. She began to write, not as a victim, but as an analyst beginning a profile. She recorded every detail from both encounters: dates, times, badge numbers, car number, their exact wording, their demeanor. She noted the younger officer's apparent discomfort, a potential point of pressure, or a witness. She noted Bauer's specific phrasing, furtive movements. This isn't the city, the demand for proof of residence. Then she did what any good analyst does with a puzzle. She started looking for the edges. Using only public legal resources, the kind anyone could access, she began to quietly dig. She found the Oakwood Police Department's personnel news, a small article from 2 years ago congratulating Officer Richard Bauer on 20 years of service. She found the town's public budget meeting minutes, which listed police salaries. She cross-referenced property records, a tedious task done through the county's open portal, and she found something interesting. Not proof, but a thread. Officer Bauer owned his home, a modest ranch house. But he also owned a small, run-down rental property on the other side of town, a property that had been purchased for a surprisingly low amount 5 years ago from a local real estate development company. That same company was currently buying up multiple old properties in Oakwood, a fact mentioned in a local newspaper article about town revitalization. It was a thread, a thin one. It could be nothing, a side investment. But it was a thread that connected a police officer with a history of complaints, which she found mention of in old, archived local forum discussions, to a business aggressively acquiring land. Maya sat back, staring at the screen. The quiet anger had solidified into something cold and hard and determined. This was no longer about a few unpleasant interactions. This was a pattern of behavior by a public official. And that pattern might have roots. She was here to rest, to escape the darkness of her work. But the darkness, it seemed, had a way of finding her. And Maya Thorne had never been one to ignore a puzzle, especially when the puzzle pieces were now knocking on her door, shining a light in her face and telling her she didn't belong. She closed the laptop. The house was silent, but her mind was louder than ever, ticking through possibilities, strategies, and a single, clear resolution. This would not happen a third time. The next move would be hers. The rain started as a gentle patter and grew into a steady, gray downpour. It matched Maya's mood perfectly. A week had passed since the incident on her run. The cruiser hadn't crawled past her house at night. The town had been quiet, but the quiet now felt different. It felt like the pause between heartbeats, heavy with waiting. She hadn't been idle. Her personal dossier on Officers Bauer and Murphy was now a detailed file. She dug deeper into the real estate company, Laurel Creek Developments. Its owner was a man who sat on the town's planning board. There were whispers in old council meeting transcripts about zoning variances pushed through quickly, complaints from longtime residents about pressure to sell. It was a classic small-town pattern, and Officer Bauer's little rental property was a tiny knot in the net. It wasn't her case. It wasn't her job. But Maya's mind didn't work that way. Once she saw a pattern, she had to trace it to its end. She'd finally called her section chief, not to report harassment, but to ask a casual, professional question. "Sir, ever heard of Laurel Creek Developments? Maybe popping up on any periphery radar?" She was on the video call from her home office, the rain streaking the window behind her. Her chief, a man with a kind face and tired eyes, frowned. "Oakwood? Might be. There's a broader state-level look at suspicious property flips in a few suburban counties. Quiet, non-federal stuff. Why? You on vacation or working?" He smiled slightly, just curious. "Something local feels off," she said, choosing her words carefully. She didn't mention the police. "Not yet. Well, if your curiosity turns up anything solid, you know the channel. But Thorne, the point is for you to rest." His tone was gentle but firm. "I know, I just—" A bright sweep of headlights cut through the rainy twilight, washing over her wall. They slowed. Then they stopped right outside her house. The familiar shape of the cruiser was a dark blot in the rain. Maya's body went still. "Sir, I have to go. Something's come up. Everything okay?" "Probably nothing. I'll call you tomorrow." She ended the call before he could reply. Her eyes locked on the window. The cruiser sat there, engine running, wipers swishing. 1 minute, 2. It wasn't driving by. It was parked. A declaration. The hot anger, the one she'd felt on the street, was gone. In its place was a cold, clear focus. This was the move. She had expected it, and now it was here. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and walked to the front door. If they were coming to her door, she would meet them on the porch. But they didn't get out. After another long moment, the car slowly pulled away, continuing down the street. A show of presence. A reminder. Maya stood in her doorway, the damp air chilling her. No, they didn't get to do this. She needed air. She needed to move. Grabbing her car keys, she decided to drive to the 24-hour supermarket a few towns over. Get out of Oakwood for an hour. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming on the roof of her car. She drove carefully, her mind replaying the cruiser's silent stop. She was so focused that she didn't immediately register the lights in her rearview mirror. Not until they flashed bright, insistent blue and red dot, her stomach dropped. Here it was. She signaled and pulled over onto the wide, rainy shoulder of the county road. The cruiser pulled in behind her, its lights painting the inside of her car in dizzying pulses. She rolled her driver's side window down halfway, the cold rain misting in. She watched in the mirror as both doors opened. Bauer and Murphy and rain slickers walked toward her. Bauer went to her window. Murphy went to the passenger side, shining his flashlight into the back seat. "Evening," Bauer said, his voice raised over the rain. Water dripped from the brim of his hat. Officer, Maya said, her voice neutral. She kept her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. You were driving a little erratic back there, weaving within your lane. The rain is heavy. I was being cautious, she replied, her eyes forward. License and registration, please. This time, Maya didn't argue. She moved slowly, deliberately. She took her wallet from her purse on the passenger seat. From a slim, hidden compartment behind her credit cards, she slid out her FBI credentials. She kept them pinched in her palm, hidden. Then she took out her driver's license and her vehicle registration from the glove box. She handed the license and registration to Bauer. He took them, shining his flashlight on the documents. Step out of the vehicle, please. Maya's jaw tightened. Why? I need to conduct a search. I smell marijuana coming from the car. It was such a bald, cliché lie that Maya almost laughed. Almost. The cold focus hardened into ice. You smell marijuana. In this rain. With my windows closed. Step out of the vehicle, Bauer repeated, his voice hardening. Now, this was the escalation. This was the move from harassment to something more tangible, more violating. Maya knew the play. Refuse, and she'd be arrested for obstruction. Comply, and she let him trample through her private space on a false pretext. She looked past Bauer to Murphy, who was standing by the passenger door, looking miserable in the rain. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Okay, Maya said, her voice dangerously quiet. She opened the door and stepped out into the pouring rain. It soaked through her shirt almost instantly. Bauer gestured for her to stand near the front of her car. Pat down for weapons, he said, and without waiting for consent, he began a rough, perfunctory pat down over her clothes. The violation was physical, humiliating. Maya stared straight ahead at the rain-smeared headlights of the cruiser. Her FBI credentials a hard secret square in her clenched fist in her pocket. We're going to search the car, Bauer said, stepping back. He nodded to Murphy. Check it. Murphy, looking reluctant, opened her passenger door and started shining his flashlight around. Bauer went to the driver's side and began pulling everything out. He opened her glove compartment again, dumping the manual and a pack of tissues onto the wet seat. He leaned in, reaching under the seats. Maya stood in the rain, a statue. She watched as Bauer opened her trunk, pulling out her grocery bags, a gym bag, a spare tire. He handled her things carelessly, letting them get wet. He was creating a mess, a scene of chaos, all to prove a point that didn't need proving. He had the power. The search was thorough and brutal in its pointlessness. It took nearly 15 minutes. The rain plastered Maya's hair to her head, ran down her neck. She never shivered. She never looked away. Finally, Bauer slammed the trunk shut. He walked back to her, empty-handed. Of course, he hadn't expected to find anything. The search was the punishment. All right, he said, as if doing her a favor. You can go. Drive carefully. Maya didn't move. She looked at her car, her belongings strewn about, getting soaked. She looked at Murphy, who was carefully placing her things from the passenger seat back, a faint look of shame on his face. Then she looked at Bauer. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and carried a razor's edge in the rain. Are we done, officer? We're done. For now. Maya gave a single slow nod. She turned, got back into her driver's seat, which was now wet from Bauer's slicker. She didn't start the car. She waited. Bauer watched her for a moment, then walked back to the cruiser with Murphy. They got in. The cruiser's lights shut off, and it pulled away, disappearing into the gray wall of rain. Only then did Maya move. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her FBI credentials. They were dry, protected. She looked at the badge, the photo, her own name. The cold inside her had reached a new depth. This wasn't just anger. This was a decision. The time for quiet observation, for personal dossiers, was over. The line had been crossed. Deliberately, and with malice, she carefully gathered her soaked belongings from the passenger seat and floor, her movements methodical. She closed the glove box. She put the car in drive and pulled back onto the road, the wipers working furiously against the storm. She didn't drive to the supermarket. She drove straight home. The puzzle was no longer an abstract exercise. It was personal. And the man who had just thrown her life into the rainy gutter had no idea that the person he was trying to intimidate held the ultimate key to his own undoing. The key was in her hand, and it was time to use it. The rain stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world looking washed and new. Maya didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, a single lamp on, her hair still damp from the night before. The cold, focused fury had burned through the night, leaving behind something pure and solid, a plan. She didn't feel like a victim sitting there. She felt like an agent preparing for an operation. Her personal feelings, the humiliation, the anger, were packed away into a small, locked box in her mind. What remained was the professional. She took her personal laptop and opened the dossier she'd compiled. She reviewed every date, every time, every quoted word from Officer Bauer. She looked at the property records, the connections to Laurel Creek developments. It was circumstantial. For a criminal case, but it was more than enough for something else. A conversation. When the sky began to lighten, she picked up her phone. Not her personal one. She had a second secure phone issued by her office. She made 2 calls. The first was to her section chief. There was no small talk this time. "Sir, it's Thorne. I'm invoking a need for official, low-profile backup. I have a situation with local law enforcement in Oakwood. It's escalated. I also have preliminary, unverified information that may connect an officer here to a property scheme you mentioned. I need to open a door today. Officially." Her chief listened. He asked a few sharp, precise questions about the traffic stop. His voice, usually kind, turned flat and hard. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes." "Do you need immediate extraction?" "No, sir." "I need authority. I'm going to go have a talk." He was silent for a moment. "You have it. Use the regional field office as your point of contact. I'll make the call. Thorne, be surgical." "Always," she said that the second call was to the regional FBI field office. She spoke to an assistant director, a woman whose voice carried the weight of 1,000 tough conversations. Maya gave her the bullet points. The assistant director understood immediately. "We'll fax over the liaison notice and my direct line to their chief. Give us an hour, and walk in." By 10 a.m., everything was in motion. Maya dressed with deliberate care. She chose a tailored, dark pantsuit, a crisp white shirt underneath. It was professional, authoritative, but not flashy. She pulled her hair back into a severe but neat bun. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman who liked quiet walks and novels was gone. The federal agent was back. She placed her FBI credentials, the real ones, in their leather holder into the outer pocket of her blazer. She picked up a simple black portfolio. Inside was a notepad, a pen, and nothing else. The evidence was all in her head. She drove to the Oakwood Public Safety Building. It was a modest brick building next to the town library. Her heart was beating a steady, strong rhythm, not from nerves, but from anticipation. This was the pivot point dot. She parked in a visitor spot, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The lobby was small, with a worn linoleum floor and a high counter behind plexiglass. A middle-aged sergeant with a tired face sat at a desk, typing slowly. "Can I help you?" he asked, without looking up. Maya approached the counter. She didn't speak until he glanced up. Then she opened her credentials and held them flat against the plexiglass. Special Agent Maya Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have an appointment to speak with your police chief. The sergeant's eyes widened. He leaned forward, peering at the badge and ID. His tiredness vanished, replaced by stunned alertness. Yes, ma'am. One moment, please. He fumbled. For his phone, dialing an extension, his voice a low, urgent mumble. Within a minute, a side door buzzed open. A man in a crisply pressed chief's uniform, his face a mask of professional welcome and deep confusion, appeared. Agent Thorne? I'm Chief Edwards. Please, come right back. He led her down a short hallway, past a few open doors where curious faces peeked out, and into a small, cluttered conference room. We weren't expecting. I received a fax about a community outreach liaison, but he trailed off, clearly off balance. That was the simplest way to ensure a meeting, Chief, Maya said, her voice calm and even. She took a seat at the head of the conference table without being asked. It was a small power move, and she saw him notice it. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. There's a specific matter I need to discuss. It involves 2 of your officers. I'd like them to join us. Chief Edwards blinked. My officers? Which officers? Officer Richard Bauer and Officer Ben Murphy. Please have them report to this room. The chief's confusion was now tinged with worry. He had no idea what this was about, but the presence of an FBI agent asking for specific patrol officers by name was every police chief's nightmare. May I ask what this pertains to? It pertains to multiple interactions with a federal agent over the past 10 days, Maya said, locking eyes with him. The most recent being an unlawful search of my vehicle on County Road 7 last night at approximately 7:45 p.m. Chief Edwards paled. He understood now. The federal agent was the woman sitting at his table. I see. I'll have them brought in immediately. He left the room. His steps hurried. Maya sat perfectly still. She placed her portfolio on the table, her hands folded on top of it. She listened to the quiet hum of the building. Out in the patrol bay, the summons crackled over the radio. Bauer and Murphy, report to the chief's conference room, immediately. In their cruiser, parked behind a diner, Bauer heard the call. He exchanged a smirk with Murphy. Probably that complaint from the new girl on Cyprus. Paperwork nuisance. Let's go smile and nod for 5 minutes. They walked into the station with a casual, swaggering confidence. Bauer pushed open the door to the conference room, a practiced, indifferent look on his face. Chief, you wanted to see. His voice died in his throat. His eyes landed on Maya. For a second, there was absolute silence. Bauer's brain simply refused to process the information. The woman from the grocery store, from the rainy street, from the traffic stop, was sitting at the head of the table. But she wasn't that woman anymore. The clothes, the posture, the ice-cold stillness of her, it was a different person entirely. Murphy, who had been a step behind, stopped dead in the doorway. His eyes went wide, his mouth slightly open. The color drained from his face so completely he looked ill. Chief Edwards, standing off to the side, cleared his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Officers. This is Special Agent Maya Thorne of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Maya didn't smile. She didn't stand. She simply looked at them, first at Murphy's terrified face, then letting her gaze settle on Bauer. She watched as the older officer's arrogance shattered. It didn't melt away. It cracked like glass hit by a sudden, sharp blow. His smug expression collapsed into blank shock and morphed into dawning, horror-struck comprehension. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Please, Maya said, her voice cutting through the thick air. Close the door and have a seat. Murphy moved like a robot, pulling the door shut and sinking into the nearest chair. his eyes fixed on the table. Bauer remained standing for another few seconds, paralyzed. Before lowering himself stiffly into a chair, Maya reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a small, high-quality digital recorder. She placed it gently on the table in front of her and pressed play. The sound of rain, loud and clear, filled the room. Then Bauer's voice, tinny but unmistakable. Asterisk, step out of the vehicle, please. Asterisk, asterisk. Why? Asterisk, asterisk. I need to conduct a search. I smell marijuana coming from the car. Asterisk. She let it play for 30 seconds, just enough to capture the core of the lie and the order. Then she stopped it. The silence that followed was heavier than before. She looked at Chief Edwards, whose face was now a storm of anger and embarrassment. Chief, as you can hear, the probable cause for the search of my vehicle was fabricated. The entire event was a punitive escalation following 2 previous instances of questionable detention and harassment, which I have documented in detail. She didn't look at Bauer or Murphy. She spoke about them as if they weren't there. This constitutes a serious abuse of authority and a potential obstruction of a federal officer. Finally, she turned her head. She looked directly at Officer Bauer, who seemed to have shrunk in his chair. His face was slick with a thin sweat. Officer Bauer, she said, and he flinched at the sound of his name. Your conduct has been unacceptable. But my interest today isn't just in your conduct. It's in your connections. She paused, letting the word connections hang in the air. She saw a new kind of fear enter Bauer's eyes, a deeper, more desperate fear than the shock of her identity. It was the fear of someone who has more to hide. We'll be discussing those next, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. Starting with Laurel Creek Developments. Starting with your property on Sycamore Street. Bauer's breath left him in a soft, defeated rush. He didn't just look scared anymore. He looked ruined. Murphy just stared, trembling, realizing. He wasn't just in trouble with his chief. He was in a room with a force that could end his career before it started, and he had followed the wrong leader right over the cliff. Maya leaned forward slightly, her eyes moving between the 2 stricken officers and their horrified chief. The game was over. Now the real work began. The air in the conference room was so still it felt like glass. Everyone was holding their breath. The only sound was the faint, panicked rhythm of Officer Bauer's breathing. Maya let the silence stretch out, let the weight of her words press down on them. Chief Edwards was the first to break. He turned on Bauer, his voice a low, furious growl. What property? What is she talking about? Bauer couldn't form words. He shook his head, a desperate, tiny motion. His eyes were darting around the room, as if looking for an exit that wasn't their dot. Maya spoke, her voice calm, pulling everyone's focus back to her. She wasn't there to yell. She was there to explain the situation, like a teacher outlining a problem on a board. Chief, your officer owns a rental property purchased 5 years ago from Laurel Creek. Developments for approximately 40% below its assessed value at the time. That same company is currently under state-level scrutiny for a pattern of aggressive, possibly fraudulent property acquisitions. In this and 2 neighboring counties. She turned her gaze back to Bauer, a police officer receiving a significant financial benefit from a company whose success depends on favorable treatment from local authorities like zoning variances and the quiet removal of complications presents a clear conflict of interest. It also provides a possible motive for a pattern of aggressive behavior toward new residents who might be perceived as potential obstacles or witnesses. She was careful with her words. She didn't accuse him of taking bribes. She didn't say he'd broken specific laws. She laid out the facts, the connections, and let the ugly picture form in everyone's mind. Chief Edwards looked sick. He'd known about Bauer's attitude. He'd seen the complaint files, thin but there. He'd shrugged it off as an old-school cop set in his ways. This was a tidal wave crashing over that excuse. Murphy finally found his voice, a thin, strained whisper. I didn't know about any of that. He said we were keeping the area clean. He said she was. He said I was what? Maya asked, not unkindly, but with a piercing directness. Murphy swallowed, shame flushing his neck. That you were trouble. That people like you brought problems. People like me, Maya repeated softly. She nodded, as if confirming a hypothesis. She looked at the young officer. He was a follower, weak and impressionable. He was also a potential source of truth. Your cooperation, Officer Murphy, in recounting the exact nature of your patrol instructions and these interactions, will be noted. It matters. The message was clear. You can go down with him, or you can start talking. Chief Edwards sank into a chair, running a hand over his face. Agent Thorne, on behalf of the Oakwood Police Department, I apologize, profoundly. This is a failure at supervision and integrity. What happens now? This was the moment. The power was absolute. She could have them arrested on the spot, call in a swarm of federal agents, turn the small station into a circus. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was justice, and sometimes justice was a precise, quiet thing. Now, Maya said, we contain the damage and we correct the course. She looked at Bauer. Officer Bauer, you will be suspended, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge, your service weapon, and all department property to your chief before you leave this building. You will have no contact with any member of this department except as directed by internal affairs or federal investigators. You will also have no contact, direct or indirect, with Laurel Creek Developments or its principals. Is that understood? Bauer, his spirit broken, just nodded. The fight was gone. He was looking at the end of his career, and possibly prison. As for the broader investigation into Laurel Creek, Maya continued, addressing the chief, my office will be in touch with you and the state investigators. Your full cooperation is expected. Any attempt to obscure or minimize Officer Bauer's actions or his ties to this company will be viewed as obstruction of a federal inquiry. You have it. Complete cooperation, Chief Edwards said quickly. Good. Maya stood up. The movement made Bauer flinch. She gathered her recorder and her portfolio. Officer Murphy, you will write a full, detailed statement of the events of the last 10 days, including every instruction Officer Bauer gave you regarding me or any other resident. You will deliver it to your chief by end of day. Your honesty will be verified. Murphy nodded vigorously, a man grasping a lifeline. Maya walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the knob, and looked back at the three men. One broken, one terrified, one deeply ashamed. This ends here. The harassment, the intimidation, the abuse of that badge, it's over. You will fix what's broken in this house. And I will be watching. She didn't wait for a response. She opened the door and walked out, down the quiet hallway, past the desks where clerks and officers had subtly stopped all pretense of work, their eyes wide with unasked questions. She walked through the lobby, past the sergeant who now looked at her with something like awe, and out into the late morning sun. The air outside felt different, lighter. It was the same Oakwood, the same quiet street, but the weight that had been pressing down on her since the grocery store parking lot was gone. She drove home. The silence in her car was peaceful now, not heavy. When she pulled into her driveway on Cypress Lane, she sat for a moment. She looked at her house. It looked like what it was supposed to be again, a place of peace. Inside, she changed out of the suit into soft jeans and a t-shirt. She made a cup of tea and took it to her back porch, sitting in a simple wooden chair. The birds were at the feeder. A squirrel chased another up a tree. Later that afternoon, from her window, she saw the change. A different patrol car, one she didn't recognize, drove down Cypress Lane. It drove at a normal speed. It didn't slow at her driveway. It didn't stop. It just passed by, doing its actual job. A small, real smile touched her lips. The days that followed were quiet. The kind of quiet she had originally come for. She read her book in the backyard. She planted some flowers. She went for long walks, day or night. And no one shined a spotlight on her. She learned, through her official channels, that Bauer's suspension had become the start of a deeper internal affairs probe, closely tied to the state's expanding case against the development company. The favors he'd done were coming to light. Parking tickets conveniently vanished for company executives. Code enforcement calls about the company's properties that never got logged. Officer Murphy had, indeed, cooperated fully, providing a damning account of Bauer's mindset. He was looking at a long, hard road to rebuild trust, but he had a chance. One evening about a week later, her personal phone buzzed. It was her section chief. "Heard you handled your vacation with typical subtlety," he said. A smile in his voice. "It was getting noisy," she replied, watching the fireflies blink in the gathering dark. "The mess you uncovered, it's bigger than that one officer. You kicked a rock and found a whole nest. The state AG's office is thrilled and embarrassed." "I didn't do it for them," Maya said simply. "I know." He paused. "You ready to come back to the world?" She looked out at the peaceful, dark street. She thought about the novel on her table, halfway finished. She thought about the flowers she'd planted that were just starting to peek out of the soil. "Soon," she said, "but not just yet. I think I've finally remembered how to be quiet." She hung up and stayed on the porch as night fully fell. The patrol car that passed now was just a pair of gentle headlights in the dark, a part of the background, a sound of order being kept properly. The fear was gone. The anger had been spent. Maya Thorne sat in the quiet she had earned, a quiet that was no longer an escape, but a choice. And for now, it was exactly where she wanted to be.